Beloved, it is important that we begin by correcting a dangerous misunderstanding many people carry about enemies. When we hear the word enemy, the mind immediately runs to faces, names, and familiar personalities. But if you reduce enemies only to people, you will fight the wrong battles and exhaust your strength where it is not required. Many times the real opposition is not the individual you can see, but the spiritual forces, patterns, systems, and unseen agendas working through situations. Scripture teaches us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That means if flesh and blood is what you are fighting, you are already losing focus. Every destiny that matters attracts resistance. The presence of opposition is not proof that God has abandoned you. In many cases, it is evidence that heaven has invested in you. Darkness does not waste resources on empty vessels. Resistance shows up when purpose is involved. That delay, that misunderstanding, that unexplained hostility, that cycle you cannot trace, these are not coincidences. They are indicators that something in your life is threatening a territory you have not yet entered. Some enemies are not aggressive. They are subtle. They do not shout, they whisper. They come disguised as delays, familiar patterns, repeated disappointments, and invisible ceilings. Others come through people, but those people may not even know they are being used. This is why discernment is more powerful than confrontation. When you confront people instead of understanding systems, you escalate battles God never asked you to fight. Wisdom teaches you to identify the source before responding to the symptom. There are enemies that thrive on your reaction. The moment you respond emotionally, they gain permission to continue. This is why spiritual maturity is measured by how you respond under pressure. Not every attack requires a reply. Some battles are won by silence. Some enemies are defeated the moment you refuse to panic. When you understand that not every opposition deserves your voice, you protect your authority. There are also internal enemies, mindsets, fears, trauma, and limitations planted by past experiences. Many people pray against external enemies while carrying internal ones that sabotage progress from within. If the enemy cannot stop you from moving forward, he will attempt to corrupt how you see yourself. Once identity is damaged, direction collapses naturally. This is why renewal of the mind is not optional, it is warfare. You must also understand that enemies do not always come to destroy you. Sometimes they come to delay you. Delay is one of the most effective weapons because it creates frustration, and frustration produces doubt. When doubt settles in, people abandon processes prematurely. But God works through processes. What looks like resistance may actually be refinement. Not every closed door is an enemy. Some doors close to redirect you into accuracy. There is a difference between an enemy and an assignment. An enemy seeks your destruction. An assignment strengthens your capacity. If you misinterpret assignments as enemies, you will resist the very thing God is using to prepare you. Discernment helps you separate warfare from training. Mature believers do not rebuke everything. They discern first. Enemies also expose what is still fragile in you. They reveal prayerlessness, impatience, pride, and dependence on self. This is why God sometimes allows opposition to remain, not to defeat you, but to reveal you. When you see what pressure produces in you, you gain insight into what still needs alignment. God is more interested in who you are becoming than how quickly you escape discomfort. Another truth you must understand is that some enemies are seasonal. They appear because you are transitioning. Movement provokes resistance. The moment Israel began to journey, opposition arose. Stillness rarely attracts warfare. When things begin to stir in your life, expect contention. But do not interpret it as a sign to retreat. It is often confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. Lastly, never forget this: enemies do not have the final word. They may initiate conflict, but God determines the conclusion. When God decides to intervene, battles end without noise. Confessions happen without interrogation. Exposure occurs without effort. Your responsibility is not to fight blindly, but to stay aligned, discerning, prayerful, and rested in the knowledge that no opposition outlives divine authorization. Beloved, there is a higher way God deals with opposition, and it is not through human retaliation. One of the greatest traps the enemy sets for believers is the temptation to respond in the flesh. The moment you decide to fight back with anger, bitterness, manipulation, or revenge, you may feel justified, but you have stepped out of divine order. God never asked you, to defend yourself at the expense of your alignment. He asked you to trust him as your vindicator. There is a difference between justice and revenge. Revenge is personal, emotional, and impulsive. Justice is orderly, precise, and divinely executed. When you leave room for God, he fights in a way that preserves your peace and exposes the enemy without corrupting your spirit. Many people win arguments and lose authority. Others prove points and lose presence. But when God vindicates, you lose nothing and gain clarity. Scripture shows us repeatedly that when God steps into a matter, he does not shout, he does not negotiate. He simply rearranges realities. What humans struggle to explain, God resolves effortlessly. Enemies collapse not because you outspoke them, but because truth entered the situation. Light does not argue with darkness. It appears and darkness leaves. This is the mystery of divine vindication. When you retaliate, you limit God's involvement. But when you remain aligned, silent where necessary, and prayerful, God takes over the narrative. Suddenly, those who accused you begin to explain themselves. Those who misrepresented you begin to contradict their own lies. Those who planned evil become trapped in their own schemes. Not because you exposed them, but because God removed their covering. This is what it means to send it back with sand. Sand represents something powerless, scattered, and weightless. When God sends back what was meant to harm you, he strips it of its structure. What was carefully planned returns broken, confused, and ineffective. The intention remains, but the power is gone. The plot exists, but it cannot stand. That is the signature of divine judgment, evil returned without force. Understand this: God does not fight like men fight. Men fight to prove dominance. God fights to restore order. When he steps in, the goal is not just your victory, but the establishment of truth. This is why your enemies end up confessing. Truth has a way of pressing on consciences. When God lifts his hand, pressure increases, and people begin to speak without being asked. They explain, justify, contradict, and expose themselves. Many believers are in a hurry to clear their names, but God is more interested in clearing your heart. If your heart is clean, your name is safe. Silence is not weakness when God is involved. It is confidence. The loudest people in battles are often the most afraid. When you know God is handling a matter, you do not rush to speak. You wait because you trust the outcome. Divine vindication also protects you from unnecessary enemies. When you fight back, you create sides. When God fights for you, he settles the matter without multiplying conflict. Some people who would have become long-term enemies are simply silenced by truth. Others are corrected quietly, and some walk away on their own. This is the wisdom of letting God lead. There is also a timing to vindication. God does not expose everything immediately. If he did, some people would be destroyed rather than corrected. God's judgments are redemptive before they are punitive. But when the time comes, exposure is swift and undeniable. What was whispered becomes public. What was hidden surfaces naturally. And it happens without your fingerprints on it. You must trust God enough to let go of the desire to control outcomes. Control is a sign of fear. Trust is a sign of faith. When you release the matter to God, you are not being passive, you are being strategic. Heaven fights best when humans step aside. Remember this: when God vindicates you, your enemies do not just lose, they learn. They learn that touching what God has defended is dangerous. They learn that lies collapse under divine scrutiny. They learn that silence backed by God is louder than accusation. Beloved, one of the greatest frustrations people experience in their walk with God is timing. We often agree with what God wants to do, but we struggle with when he chooses to do it. Yet timing is not an accessory in the spirit, it is a language. God speaks through timing as much as he speaks through prophecy. When God assigns a time frame, he is revealing intention, authority, and control over events. Throughout scripture, you will notice that certain time frames repeat themselves, and among them, the pattern of 3 days carries weight. 3 days represent moments when God allows a situation to appear settled, concluded, or even dead before stepping in. It is the space where human ability ends and divine intervention begins. On the first day, confusion sets in. On the second day, pressure intensifies. By the third day, expectation seems unreasonable. And that is precisely where God likes to act. 3 days symbolize the boundary between human endurance and divine interruption. God often waits until there is no argument left, no strength remaining, and no alternative explanation possible. When he moves, it becomes undeniable that it was him, This is why some of you have experienced prolonged silence followed by sudden clarity. God was not absent. He was positioning the moment for maximum impact. Timing is also God's way of preserving you. If certain truths were revealed too early, they would destroy relationships prematurely. If some victories came too soon, pride would contaminate the outcome. God delays not to punish, but to protect. What looks like waiting is often God rearranging people's systems and hearts to align with His purpose. When God assigns a 3-day window, it is not about the calendar, it is about completion. 3 speaks of divine fullness. It means everything that needs to happen behind the scenes is being finalized. Forces are being restrained. Permissions are being revoked. Lines are being crossed in the spirit. And while it seems quiet on the surface, movement is happening in realms you cannot see. Many believers make the mistake of quitting in the middle of divine timing. They pray on the first day, endure on the second day, and give up before the third day. But those who understand God's nature remain positioned. They do not panic when nothing changes outwardly. They know that when God is about to move, things often look the most impossible. Timing also exposes trust. Anyone can trust God when results are immediate. True faith is revealed when there's a gap between promise and manifestation. That gap is not empty, it is instructional. God teaches patience, endurance, and discernment in the waiting. He teaches you how to rest without answers and remain confident without evidence. There is also a suddenness attached to divine timing. God can take what has been delayed for years and resolve it in days. He can compress seasons. He can accelerate outcomes. This is why you must never measure God's speed by your history. What took long to break can break quickly when the appointed time arrives. When God intervenes on His timeline, exposure happens rapidly. What was hidden surfaces without effort. Confessions come without confrontation. Systems collapse without resistance. That is the beauty of divine timing. It does not struggle. It executes. One moment nothing is happening. The next moment everything changes. Understand this as well. Timing determines interpretation. The same event that would have caused confusion earlier becomes confirmation when it happens at the right time. God waits until the environment can carry the truth. He waits until hearts are prepared. He waits until the outcome will glorify Him, not distract from Him. Some of you are closer to your breakthrough than you realize. The pressure you feel is not a sign of defeat. It is a sign of convergence. Things are lining up. Forces are colliding. Decisions are being made in realms you cannot access. And when the moment arrives, it will not announce itself with noise. It will reveal itself with results. Do not rush God and do not doubt Him in the silence. When the appointed time arrives, what resisted you will respond. What opposed you will explain itself. And what was delayed will resolve swiftly. Beloved, there are seasons when your greatest act of faith is not what you say, but what you refuse to say. Many people believe power is always loud, but in the spirit, silence can be a weapon. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of confusion, but the silence of alignment. When your spirit is aligned with God, you do not rush to explain yourself, defend yourself, or announce your next move. You learn the discipline of stillness. Silence is dangerous only when it is empty. But silence filled with prayer is forceful. Prayer is not noise, it is alignment. When you pray, you are not informing God, you are synchronizing with His will. And when alignment is achieved, words become fewer because confidence increases. The need to explain fades when you trust the one who sees the full picture. Many battles are prolonged because people speak too soon. They reveal pain before healing has taken place. They announce plans before wisdom has finished arranging them. In doing so, they invite unnecessary resistance. There are things God tells you that are not meant for public processing. They are meant for private alignment. What you expose prematurely, you weaken. Silence also protects you from emotional leakage. When you speak from hurt, you empower the very thing that wounded you. When you speak from anger, you hand over authority. But when you stay quiet and take the matter to God, you retain control of your spirit. A guarded spirit is a powerful spirit. Prayer shifts the battlefield. It moves the conflict from the visible to the invisible, from opinion to authority. When you pray, you stop wrestling people and start engaging systems. You stop reacting and start ruling. This is why mature believers do not panic under pressure. They retreat into prayer, not to escape, but to realign. Alignment means agreeing with God's perspective even when your emotions disagree. It means choosing trust over urgency. Many times, God is not waiting for you to speak louder. He is waiting for you to listen longer. Instructions often come in stillness. Direction is clear when noise is reduced. There is also wisdom in knowing when to speak. Silence does not mean permanent quietness. It means timing your voice. There are moments when God will tell you to speak, and when you do, one sentence will carry more authority than hours of argument. Words spoken from alignment carry weight. Words spoken from emotion carry consequences. Some victories are aborted because people announce them too early. They speak as though the process is complete when it has only begun. In the spirit, some things are fragile before they are established. Silence allows roots to grow. Prayer allows foundations to be laid. Publicity can wait until strength has formed. Alignment also requires submission. You cannot be aligned if you are insisting on your own way. Prayer humbles you. It reminds you that God's wisdom exceeds your logic. In prayer, God often corrects your assumptions. What you thought was an attack, He reveals as a redirection. What you thought was delay, He reveals as preparation. Another reason silence is powerful is that it frustrates the enemy. The enemy thrives on reaction. When there is no reaction, he miscalculates. He expects panic, but you pray. He expects defense, but you rest, and in that rest, God works. Heaven responds faster when earth is quiet. Alignment also keeps you from misrepresenting God. When you speak outside of His will, you may win sympathy but lose accuracy. Silence gives God room to speak through outcomes instead of arguments. Results speak louder than explanations. Some of you are in seasons where God is teaching you restraint, not because you lack words, but because your words matter. When your words matter, God teaches you when to release them. Until then, prayer sustains you, silence protects you, and alignment positions you. Do not underestimate the power of a quiet believer who is deeply aligned with God. Such a person does not need to fight. God fights for them. Such a person does not need to announce victory. Victory announces itself. Beloved, there is a force that no scheme can withstand, no lie can outlast, and no darkness can negotiate with, and that force is truth. Truth is not just information, it is a spiritual weapon. When God releases truth into a situation, exposure becomes inevitable. This is why confession happens, not because people suddenly grow bold, but because the weight of truth becomes unbearable. Many people assume confession only means spoken words, but in the spirit, confession is broader than speech. Confession can be seen in actions, in sudden reversals, in inconsistent stories, and in the collapse of carefully constructed narratives. When truth enters, lies lose coordination. What once appeared organized becomes chaotic. What seemed hidden begins to surface naturally. God does not expose for entertainment, He exposes for alignment. Exposure is not humiliation, it is correction. But when truth confronts deception, there is pressure. That pressure forces what is hidden to come into the open. This is why you do not need to chase exposure. You do not need to investigate, interrogate, or manipulate circumstances. Your responsibility is alignment. God handles revelation. One of the mistakes believers make is trying to force confessions through confrontation. They demand explanations, seek apologies, and push for acknowledgement. But forced confessions are often incomplete and insincere. Divine confession is different. When God applies pressure, people speak because they cannot remain silent. Their own words betray them. Their own actions expose them. Truth has a way of rearranging environments. When truth is present, conversations change, decisions shift, support disappears, coverings are removed, not because you demanded it, but because truth cannot coexist with deception. Light does not need permission to shine, it simply does. Another important thing to understand is that God often allows lies to run for a while. This is not because He approves of them, but because lies expose themselves over time. Lies require maintenance, truth does not. The longer deception operates, the more effort it takes to sustain it. Eventually, cracks appear, contradictions emerge, stories change, and in that moment, confession becomes inevitable. This is why patience is powerful. When you rush exposure, you may interrupt the process God is using to make it undeniable. But when you wait, God allows truth to surface in a way that cannot be disputed. The enemy's own mouth becomes the witness against him. Confession also happens when authority shifts. When God steps in, fear changes sides. Those who were bold in deception become cautious. Those who are confident begin to explain themselves. You will notice that explanations often appear where no accusation was made. That is a sign that truth is pressing on the conscience. There are also confessions that happen through consequences. When a scheme collapses, when access is lost, when influence diminishes, when credibility erodes, these are silent confessions. They declare that something was wrong, even if no words are spoken. God knows how to reveal truth without noise. You must be careful not to interfere with this process by reacting emotionally. Emotional reactions distract from truth. They shift attention from revelation to drama. But when you remain composed, prayerful, and aligned, truth takes center stage. God is not in a hurry, but he is thorough. Another reason confession is powerful is that it restores order. Once truth is revealed, confusion ends. Decisions become easier. Directions become clearer. Even those who are hurt gain closure, not because vengeance occurred, but because clarity arrived. Truth heals by replacing speculation with certainty. Understand this: when God exposes, he does not need your assistance. Your role is to remain clean, humble, and discerning. Do not celebrate exposure, learn from it. Do not gloat over confession, grow from it. Exposure is a warning as much as it is a victory. It reminds everyone watching that nothing hidden remains hidden forever. When truth is at work, your defense is unnecessary. God becomes your witness. Your consistency becomes your evidence. Time becomes your ally. And eventually what was whispered in secret stands in the open. Beloved, one of the clearest signs that God has truly brought you victory is rest. Not noise, not celebration, not explanation, but rest. When God finishes a battle, he does not leave you agitated or restless. He settles you. If you claim victory, yet your heart is still troubled, something has not fully concluded. God's victories are complete, and they leave no residue of fear, bitterness, or obsession. Many people survive battles but do not recover from them. They win externally but remain wounded internally. God never intended victory to simply remove the enemy. He intended it to restore the believer. This is why after deliverance, rest is not optional. It is proof that the work is finished. God leads you beside still waters after warfare, not back into noise. Rest does not mean inactivity. It means freedom from anxiety. You may still be working, building, and moving forward, but without pressure. Without the constant need to look over your shoulder, without rehearsing the past. Rest means the battle no longer defines your posture. One danger after victory is fixation. Some people keep revisiting what God already resolved. They replay conversations, rehearse injustices, and relive pain. In doing so, they reopen doors God already closed. True victory allows you to move on without explanation. Closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes it is peace. Rest also protects you from becoming like your enemy. Prolonged conflict can reshape character if you are not careful. People who fight too long become harsh, suspicious, and defensive. God does not just deliver you from opposition, he preserves your heart from contamination. Rest cleanses the soul. After victory, gratitude becomes your language. Gratitude grounds you. It reminds you that the outcome was not by strength or wisdom, but by grace. When you thank God sincerely, pride cannot survive. Gratitude keeps you aligned and humble, ready for the next assignment. Growth is also required after victory. Every battle teaches something. Wisdom comes from reflection, not revenge. God expects you to extract lessons from warfare so that future battles require less effort. The goal is not repeated conflict, but increased authority. Another responsibility after victory is restraint. Do not over-explain what God did. Some testimonies are meant to inspire, others are meant to remain sacred. Wisdom discerns what to share and what to keep between you and God. Oversharing can invite unnecessary attention and reopen settled matters. Rest also signals trust. When you rest, you declare that you believe God truly handled the situation. Anxiety after victory is a subtle accusation against God's ability to keep you. Peace honors God. Calmness glorifies him. You must also understand that rest prepares you for promotion. God does not promote exhausted minds. He does not entrust greater responsibilities to wounded hearts. Rest restores clarity, sensitivity, and discernment. It resets your spiritual posture. Some people fear rest because they are used to struggle. They mistake peace for stagnation. But rest is not the absence of movement. It is movement without strain. God's yoke is easy and his burden is light. When things remain heavy, something is misaligned. After victory, you may notice that certain relationships fade. Do not fight to maintain what the battle already outgrew. God often clears space after warfare to make room for new assignments. Let go without guilt. Rest includes emotional release. Finally, understand that rest is warfare's final statement. It tells the enemy that he has no more influence. It tells heaven that you trust God's judgment. And it tells your own soul that the season has changed. When God gives you victory, do not rush to fight again. Sit, heal, grow, and walk forward in quiet confidence.